Welcome to our lively episode of Defense Briefing. Today, we've got a mixed bag of news that's as varied as the flavors in your favorite ice cream shop. So grab your spoon and let's dig in. First off, Asian stock markets are gearing up to open on a high note after the US markets closed a strong quarter with gains, sparking hopes of a soft landing orchestrated by the Federal Reserve. Despite some markets taking a holiday break, the future looks bright with indicators pointing up for Japan and potential gains for US-listed Chinese companies. Meanwhile, the SPY 500 is strutting around with its 20th D record this year. Talk about setting the bar high. Switching gears to a more serious note. The US and Israel are currently experiencing a bit of a rough patch over Israel's planned invasion of Rafah in the Gaza Strip. Tensions have escalated following a controversial UN Security Council vote and harsh words from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, with President Biden under pressure to address a humanitarian crisis and military aid to Israel. It's a complex situation that's developing more layers than an onion. And in the world of military tech, the U.S. Air Force's Sentinel ICBM project is facing some budget turbulence due to design changes, causing costs to soar higher than a rocket. Meanwhile, across the globe, Israel's Supreme Court has made an ruling affecting ultra-Orthodox military service, and North Carolina is seeing a change in its military and veterans affairs leadership. For those looking to unwind with some quality TV, there's a plethora of new shows to stream this April, promising to keep you glued to your screens. And finally, Maine is considering a red flag proposal in the wake of a tragic shooting, highlighting ongoing debates over gun control. Oh, that's quite the roundup here. Stay tuned as we dive deeper into these stories, providing you with all the juicy details. Please keep watching for more in-depth coverage. Asian stocks to open higher after US notches gains markets rockets rapids. Bloomberg. Equity markets in Asia are set to open higher onto April after a strong quarter for US stocks ended on a positive note amid speculation that the Fed will be able to achieve a soft landing. While markets in Australia, Hong Kong and Singapore are closed for holidays, futures contracts for the Nikkei 225 index point higher, while a gauge of US-listed Chinese companies suggests potential gains in mainland China. The SPY 500 posted its 20th D record this year, rising 10 in Q1, ending at 5,250. Biden-Netanyahu tensions Roil U.S. Israel ties, foreign policy. Tensions between the US and Israel have been inflamed by Israel's planned invasion of Rafah in the Gaza Strip. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu initially canceled a planned visit to Washington to discuss the US's concerns over the invasion, after the US abstained from a UN Security Council vote calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Netanyahu castigated the US decision, calling it a retreat from the consistent American position since the beginning of the war. The delegation's visit has since been reinstated. The U.S. President Joe Biden is under increasing pressure to address the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and table the planned invasion of Rafah. However, Biden has so far refused to put conditions on U.S. military aid to Israel and ignored calls to cut the supply of U.S. weapons to the country. There are growing doubts among Biden officials and experts that Israel's military campaign will defeat Hamas. Northrop says Air Force design changes drove higher Sentinel ICBM cost. Yahoo Shiuka. The massive cost growth of the U.S. Air Force's next intercontinental ballistic missile ICBM, Sentinel, is due to the service's design changes, particularly to the nuclear missile silo and connecting cables, according to a Northrop Grumman official. The original plan for modernizing the ICBM enterprise included keeping nearly all its existing copper cabling in place to be reused for the Sentinel. But the Air Force concluded it was necessary to upgrade the copper cables with a higher-performing fiber optic network. The Air Force also realized that the original designs for Sentinel's launch facilities would not work. The Northrop official said, with hundreds of launch facilities and thousands of miles of cable stretching across privately held land, the cost of these changes swiftly added up. Sentinel is to replace the Air Force's aging LGM-30G Minuteman. ICB missed. In 2020, Northrop Grumman received a $13.3 billion engineering and manufacturing development contract for the project. The program was expected to cost $90 billion, with the per-unit cost amounting to $118 million when its most recent cost. Schedule and performance goals were set in 2020. However, the price tag has risen by at least 30%. and the per unit cost is now about $160 million. The Air Force is studying what caused these cost overruns, which triggered a non-McCurdy breach, and the Pentagon is reviewing Sentinel to figure out how to get it back on track as well as where to find funds to keep it going. Sentinel is now expected to fall 2 years behind schedule, with its first flight test likely to take place in February 2020, cited Israeli court halts subsidies for ultra-Orthodox, deepening turmoil over mandatory military service. Associated Press. Israel Supreme Court has ruled that government subsidies for ultra-Orthodox men who do not serve in the army must be ended. The decision could have significant implications for the country's government, as ultra-Orthodox parties want draft exemptions to continue, while the centrist members of Benjamin Netanyahu's war cabinet insist that all sectors of Israeli society must contribute equally. If the ultra-Orthodox parties withdraw from the government, the country will be forced into new elections, during which Netanyahu is currently trailing significantly in the polls. North Carolina Military Affairs Secretary stepping down, with ex-legislator as successor, as he said. Associated Press. North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper has announced that Greer Martin, a former state legislator who has been working at the Pentagon, will replace Walter Gaskin as the state secretary for Military and Veterans Affairs. Gaskin, a retired 3-star Marine Corps general, is retiring from state government. The Department of Military and Veterans Affairs is responsible for managing state veterans' nursing homes and cemeteries, and promoting activities to support military installations in North Carolina. The change in leadership comes as state legislators have held oversight hearings scrutinizing the closing of the state veterans' home in Fayetteville. The Best News shows a stream in April. The Sydney Morning Herald. The author highlights the rise of television actors who have found new prominence in the streaming era. They mention actors such as Nicola Coughlan, Merritt Weaver, Jared Harris, and Tim Robinson who have delivered exceptional performances on television. The author believes that there has never been a better time to engage with a vast spectrum of work from these talented actors. The author goes on to recommend several shows across various streaming platforms for the month of April. They recommend Tripley on Netflix, The Sympathizer on Binge, Fallout on Amazon Prime, Sugar on Apple TV, The Veil on Disney, White Fever on ABC eView, and Swift Street on SBS On Demand. They provide brief descriptions of each show and highlight their appeal. The author concludes by mentioning other notable releases on streaming platforms, such as Knuckles on Paramount and Tom Jones on BritBox. They encourage readers to explore these shows and movies to add to their must-watch list. Maine lawmakers to consider late red flag proposal after state's deadliest shooting. Associated Press. Maine lawmakers will consider a proposal introduced by House Speaker Rachel Talbot allowing family members to petition a judge for temporary removal of guns following a mass shooting in 2020. Talbot said her constituents had demanded the red flag law and that it would prevent further acts of violence. A competing bill by the Democratic governor would strengthen the state's existing crisis intervention tool. The proposed red flag law would allow a member of a person's family or household, as well as police, to petition for temporary confiscation of guns. Why Biden can't force a truce on Israel, or won't. For Policy. U.S. President Joe Biden is facing pressure to take a firmer stance against Israel as the conflict with Hamas in Gaza continues. However, there are several factors that make it unlikely that Biden will exert significant pressure on Israel. Firstly, Biden has a strong emotional bond with Israel and a deep commitment to its security. This emotional connection, reinforced by decades of interaction with Israeli leaders, means that Biden is unlikely to confront Israel and is more inclined to accommodate its needs and concerns. Secondly, the current conflict is unlike any previous situation the U.S. has faced with Israel. Israel is not engaged in a conflict with another state seeking a peace agreement. It is fighting against Hamas, an organization that seeks the destruction of Israel. This makes any pressure on Israel extremely difficult, particularly as Israel deals with the trauma of the conflict and the displacement of its citizens. Finally, Biden needs Israel's cooperation to achieve any of his goals in relation to the conflict. He needs Israel to facilitate humanitarian assistance, to negotiate a ceasefire, and to work out post-conflict arrangements for Gaza. This means that any pressure on Israel that damages the U.S.-Israel relationship could be counterproductive. Overall, while there is pressure on Biden to take a tougher stance against Israel, it is unlikely that he will exert significant pressure given the factors at play. EDF in talks with nuclear fuel producers in bid to bypass Russia. Bloomberg Logokayi. Electricité de France CDF is in discussions with Orano and Westinghouse Electric over the construction of a nuclear facility in Western Europe that would reduce its reliance on Russia for supplies of reprocessed fuel. The move comes as European countries and the US seek to diminish their dependence on Russia, the world's dominant supplier of atomic fuel. EDF currently uses uranium that has undergone recycling at a Rosatom plant in Siberia for some of its 50 reactors. As iconic Martin Mars water bomber to become centerpiece of new museum exhibit. CBC, the province of British Columbia in Canada, has announced that the Martin Mars water bomber, an iconic firefighting aircraft, will be the centerpiece of a new wildfire exhibit at the British Columbia Aviation Museum. The Martin Mars, which was last used in 2015, will be flown from Port Alberni to Victoria International Airport by the end of the year and will then be transported to the museum. Aircraft which can only land and take off in water will leave from Sprout Lake and land in Sonic Inlet. The province has provided $250 to protect and preserve the aircraft as part of the exhibit. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 60O team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 60O Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 60O team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 60O Brief to meet your professional needs, you will have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 60O Brief. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 60O Brief by email.